Hello, I'm Alfredo Behrens. I am online here with Penny Woolcock. She was at the British School in Montevideo in the late 50s and early 60s. She then went to Buenos Aires, completed her high school education there, and ran away. Penny, why did you run away?
Well, the British community was not for me. I think is a short answer because, I mean, even I remember when you were talking about the British school, going to school when I was 5, and I was so excited that I was going to learn how to read, and I was very, very interested in books. And we had this little ladybird book, Jack and Anne, I think it was, and it was so boring. It was jump, Jack, jump, run, Anne, run. And Anne was always helping Mummy with the dishes, and Jack always seemed to be doing kind of interesting things with Daddy outside. And I remember feeling quite offended by that and thinking, I don't want to be Anne, And I think that there was something, and I'm only talking for myself, and other people might have felt very differently about it, but that something about that community and the kind of education that we were offered, the options for girls, it seemed to me, was that you went to school, you left school, you could be a secretary or teacher briefly until you caught a husband who was probably a businessman who would then support you while you had children and went to tea parties and complained about maids, and that was my experience or what I saw, my mother and people of her generation. And it wasn't something that I could fit into.
No, no. And so, what do you think opened your mind to a broader world?
Well, I mean, I think it was mainly my father, and my father was loved reading, and so we had a lot of books in the house, and it was through books really that I kind of understood that there was another world. Because, I mean, the British community, and it's to do with the kind of emigration that there was from the United Kingdom to both Uruguay and Argentina, was basically a mercantile immigration. It wasn't like Australia where you had a wide range of people who went.
Ah,
So it was a community that set up the stock exchange, the banks, the railways, the meat packing plants, the tanneries, so it was a business community, and everybody that I met, in my experience, worked in that way. And there weren't artists or writers or other people. So I think it was through books. And then there was one teacher, actually, I remember Miss Sandyford when I was 8. And it was the first time that occurred to me that education could be fun. And she was telling us a story about Henry VIII and Cardinal Wolsey. Why we were learning about Henry VIII and not about Uruguay
Artigas,
as Latin
Artigas, yes.
American history is another question. We could tell you all about the Tudors, but we didn't know anything about
Yeah,
Galileo, things like that. But anyway,
I'm familiar with it.
he told me this story that Cardinal Wolsey had built Hampton Court, this wonderful palace, and he imported cedar and marble from all over the place, made this beautiful palace, and invited Henry VIII for lunch. And Henry VIII came up the River Thames, got off. Cardinal Wolsey came to greet him, and Henry VIII said, "How wonderful of you to build this palace for me. Thank you very much." And and the bell rang. And I thought, no, I want to hear the end of the story. And it was the first time that I felt, gosh, there's something that you could learn that would be interesting, that would be ways of telling stories. So I'm very grateful to Miss Sandyford for that. Then I don't know if anybody remembers Mr. Knight, who had a glass eye.
Yes, yes, of
Yes.
course.
And Mr. Knight, we used to write essays, sort of stories, and I would write these stories and he would say that they made him laugh, and that was, again, it was somebody recognizing something in me that wasn't
Mm.
about behaving and about
Yes,
need to get
yes,
married,
yes, of
whatever.
course.
So there were two teachers who I remember kind of had something about them, but generally I don't think we were being educated to broaden our minds. We were being educated for marriage, if you were a girl, and if you were a boy, you were, and to comply and to obey and to look down on other people and feel that somehow we were superior to people in either Uruguay or again, that was also true in Argentina, which obviously was not the case, but there was this sense that somehow we were special, which of course we weren't. We were very, very narrow-minded in my view,
Yes, yes. So in order to be different, despite and in addition to those initial stimulus, you decided that you had to break away. Because if you didn't, you would have become one of them, so to speak.
Well, I don't have any kind of, obviously, to make any judgment about. I still am in touch with a couple of people who did what was expected, which was essentially to get married. But it wasn't really something that I could live with, and the other thing I think that was a big influence for me is that my father had loved to write, and he loved to write poems and various things when he was a young man. But there was no space for that. So he became an accountant, and he was an accountant his whole life. And there's a quote, which I've never been able to find, but I believe is from Carl Jung, who said there's no more powerful influence on a child's life than the unlived life of the parent. And so in a sense, I feel my father's unlived life, which was, perhaps to have been a writer and had a creative life, was something that I felt very driven to do, that I didn't want to live with the kind of, what I felt was kind of regret and disappointment in a sense, that he hadn't fulfilled what he dreamt.
He hadn't fulfilled his potential.
Well, all his dreams, what he really, in his heart, what he wanted. And so even though taking the kind of risks that I've taken, I've fallen flat on my face many times. I've been poor at periods, I've had unhappy love affairs, and whatever, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. But I don't regret any of it, because it was chosen. And I think doing what was expected would have really genuinely killed me, or I would have killed myself, because it would have depressed me. So I've never been depressed, I can say.
No, you don't seem to be the person. So once you broke up with that, you fled to England, or you spent some time in Spain, but really England became your home. And
Yeah, well, it was a bit sooner than that, actually, because I left school at 16, and I've never been to university or anything, although I've always been a big reader. And so at 16, I remember somebody at school saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be an artist." And it went down like a lead balloon. It was like saying, "I would like to be a prostitute," or something, because it really wasn't within the realm of anything that anybody knew. And I didn't know either how you could be an artist. So I went off into Buenos Aires. By this time, I wasn't in Uruguay anymore. And I looked for artists. And so I'd go to art galleries and I'd look into bars. And one day I looked into this bar, and it was the Bar Moderno. And there were men with berets, and they had paint on their clothes. And I thought, these are my people. I went into this bar and I ordered a coffee. And I was, I probably just had turned 17. Maybe I was still 16. And I was drinking this. And one of the guys at this table, these artists, noticed me looking, and he offered me a biscuit. And I had been told by my mother that if men offer you biscuits in the street, they've got heroin, and they're going to drug you, and then you would be carted off to Morocco and be forced to be in a harem with some sheikh or something. Of course, the opposite was true, in that there had been inverted, prostitution of Eastern European girls that was sent over for the British community. But anyway, never mind that. So I didn't want to eat the biscuit. I said, "No, you're trying to poison me." And he ate half the biscuit and gave me the other half. So I was so embarrassed, I ate it, and I sat there waiting to keel over and be dragged off to Morocco. Of course, nothing happened. So that then made me feel that there were no dangers, which actually was not, that true either.
no.
So I began to meet people in the artistic and the bohemian community in Argentina. And I met this poet on the street, and he said, "Come to an audition." And there was a play at the Instituto de Tela. It was called Libertad y otras intoxicaciones. which is really what I needed, is freedom. So I joined that theatre group and we performed, and then the police raided us. And suddenly I was out of Northern School for Girls 6 months and I was in this prison cell, a bit of a shock actually. And I fell in love with one of the guys one of the actors, and I ran away with him. That was what happened.
Wow, look at you. Right. So a biscuit, huh? That was what.
It was the biscuit was to blame for everything.
But
Yeah.
you entered into your artistic life, just to cut it short, because you became pregnant
Yeah.
with a child and you went to live in Oxford, which provided you an environment which was a bit artistic and at the same time allowed you to educate your child. And this is how
Yeah.
it started, right?
Yeah, because the public schools, the state schools in Oxford were very good, and particularly in the side of town that the academics lived. So I moved there. My son went to school. I painted and I did my art things, and I then, because as I say, we'd been brought up just to get married. I didn't know how to do anything, and I didn't want to be a secretary. So I did a lot of very menial jobs. I worked in factories.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in a hospital kitchen, and I did some very kind of, I suppose, very low paid working class jobs, which has been a kind of complete gift, really, because it was something that we didn't experience as children, or we lived in this sort of little bubble. Of suddenly being with people who are completely different from me on an equal level is something that has been very helpful to me in my creative life, when I started to have a career, because
Right.
I can go anywhere and be with people, and I understand that
And
just because
connect.
you're poor doesn't make you pathetic.
Now, how was it that from doing menial jobs, you got into your artistic career? Because,
Well, yeah.
very sad.
Sorry, I missed that.
How was it that you made that leap from menial jobs to an artistic career?
Well, I mean, it's very hard to combine filmmaking with looking after a child. So as soon as my son was a teenager, I was kind of off. So I think I was a youth worker for a little bit, working with teenagers, and because I'd been a little bit of a delinquent, as you said you were, I was very good with teenagers. They didn't frighten me. I've let your secret out of the bag. Um, so and then I did some plays with a group of girls, and then said, "Oh, let's make a film." And I
Ah,
didn't know anything about making a film, so I made this film, and then I didn't know what to do with it. And somebody from Channel 4, you always need a bit of luck in your life, came to this workshop where I'd borrowed the equipment, and he said, "Well, what have you got?" And they said, "Well, this woman came in, she borrowed our cameras and she made this." And he thought there was a kind of energy and a spirit in it. It wasn't a very good film, I have to say, but he recognized something. And that
mm,
film was then on Channel 4. And then from there, things just sort of carried on, really.
mhm. So, do you remember the name of this person? Just by because you remember the names of your professors, but what about this person?
The person that came to Channel 4, and no, that came to the Oxford workshop.
Yes.
Yeah, he was Rod Stoneman. I don't know if you'll remember having done that, but yeah.
No, but it's important. So there were some people in your life that helped usher you.
Well, I didn't know him.
No,
It's
no, no.
it was, but you always, yeah, you need somebody to go, "Oh, that's interesting." But
Yes,
you
yes.
also you need to, I very often find even now with young women that they think if you work really hard and you're really good at what you do, somebody on high will come and go, "Oh, good for you. I'm going to give you an opportunity." You
You're
have to
right.
look for opportunities,
No. I
you have
agree.
to you have to have the confidence to say, "I know this story, I can do something really interesting, and you should let me do it. Give me the money to do it."
Yes, no, I agree. You seem to be a yes person.
Yeah. Yes.
What, what would this mean to you? I mean, you ate that biscuit in Buenos Aires, but what else? What else came your way and you said, yes, I grab it. I want to run with it.
Yes, I mean, I suppose, with the operas that I've done, it's like that too. Somebody said, "Do you want to direct an opera at the Met?" And I'd never directed anything on stage before. The only stage experience I had was being in Libertad y otras intoxicaciones in 1968. And I just said yes. And then I was thinking, oh my God, I don't really know how to do this. And then you have to work very, very hard. And you also have to not bullshit. So if I had gone there and pretended that I knew things I didn't know, people will just let you drown. But if you say, I don't know how to do this, will you help me? People will help you, So, and then, years later, for example, I was attacked in the middle of the night and from the young man who wanted my bag. And either I could have become someone who became very frightened and thinking, oh, I'm getting older, I mustn't walk down the street.
You were trained to be frightened at school. But then...
Well, yeah, but I wasn't frightened because my experience ever since the biscuit was that most people will have good intentions.
Okay, the biscuit did it, yes.
So, once I had that, I thought, well, I can either walk around and be afraid or I can get to know some robbers. And so that's what I did. And that led to a whole load of work that I've done with gangs.
With the postcode gangs that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was from, you can either be curious or you can be afraid. And if you're afraid, everything closes down and your world becomes very small. And if you're curious, you have the possibility for having adventures.
Now, when that mugger was getting at you, you looked at him in the eye and you sensed there was a connection. Yeah, tell me more about it.
Well, it was a moment where he'd been kicking my head because I was shouting and trying to because actually I'm not very strong and he was very tall and big. I thought that I would be able to grab his foot while he was kicking my head and throw him over as if I was some sort of, Avengers heroine. But of course I wasn't able to do that. So I had to let go and he took my bag and then he ran across the street and my phone fell out. It was just a little Nokia phone at that time. It was 2004. And he had to go and pick it up. And I stood up because I was going to chase him. Obviously, it was going to be very effective. And we both looked at each other. And I felt there was a common humanity. He was doing his thing, which was trying to rob my bag. I was doing
making a living, yes.
Walking home at 2:00 in the morning, and we were caught in this situation where I hadn't reacted the way that he had expected, which is immediately to give in. And he had done something I didn't expect, which is to punch me in the back. And I just felt compassion actually for him. I just thought, what has made you think that it's all right to be doing this to a woman who's old enough at least to be your mother, if not your grandmother? And also because as soon as I let my bag go, he didn't kick me again. So it was a transaction. He just wanted my bag. He wasn't some psychopath. There's very few people who just want to hurt other people, So for me, it's always better to try and understand and put yourself in somebody else's shoes than to make judgments and try and then to make judgments. I don't incarcerating people and treating them in a cruel way. These things come out of the reason there's more crime in what we used to call the Villa Miserias is because people are very poor, and there are always reasons and roots for why certain places. There's nothing in the water. Where I live here, actually in London, I live in a neighborhood 2 minutes down the road that is a much poorer neighborhood, and there are different. The boys there have much more chance to go to jail and university, and the boys 2 minutes ago it's the opposite. So there have to be reasons for these. And I do feel very strongly that growing up, we only ever had one point of view, and it was, in my experience, again, other people might feel differently about it. It certainly as a child, it was anti-Semitism, it was racist, it was looking down on people, and that people who lived in the Villas were terrible people, and this is how we lived. And so I'm very glad that somehow in my life I've had the opportunity to break out of that, because I feel it's a very limited worldview.
So it's fascinating. Sometimes when we read literature, this eye-to-eye connection is usually associated with love.
With love, but it is love, isn't it? I mean, even for me with that boy,
Yes.
in a way you can say that's love. It's not romantic love, but it's
No.
for a fellow human being, isn't it?
Right. That's beautiful. And so you looked him up and said, "Well, listen, I want to know more about your life and what goes on." And this is how you made that film.
Well, no, because I didn't know him, although
No.
years later I did find out who it was,
Ah.
because, that, no, I just thought, well, there's something happening. And
Yes.
also, I was just, in London, we have a problem with knife crime. I'm sure and I know it's the same in Buenos Aires, must be
I read about it. Yes.
in Montevideo, that young men who are impoverished and uneducated and feel marginalized tend to attack each other, And so I thought there's something happening right under my nose and I don't understand what it is. And so I decided to go to Birmingham because I made a Shakespeare film there. And I knew that there were two big gangs, two very notorious gangs, the Burgers. And I hung around for a long time, which was very difficult to get to know people because they all thought I was working for the police,
Yeah.
They didn't believe that I was making a film.
Yeah.
But eventually, you meet people and again, you look them in the eye. My friend Dylan Duffus, who's been in many of my films, I met him and he said, I looked into your eye and I knew you were telling the truth. So we had a connection, even though our backgrounds were vastly. I think we can find connections, and you don't have to always just be hanging around with people the same as you.
No, no, no. But the education that you had received and your personal experiences in Buenos Aires, being in jail or whatever, had given you a breadth of aptitudes that help you make the connection if you wish, right? Whether
Yeah, and it's only fear really that keeps people from.
Okay, right. Fear is restricting.
Yeah, and I think we were brought up to be afraid of
Yes,
people
yes,
who were outside of our community.
yes.
I felt that anyway. I remember when we used to pass, the what we call the Villa Miseria is a very pejorative term, isn't it, for places where people live. And we go, oh, look, they have TV aerials. They like to have television, but they don't feed their children or whatever,
Yeah.
And that frightening place, you never go there because if you went, you were going to be killed. And, and actually there was another reality as well, that people are living in communities and they're people just like everyone else.
Yes. Yes. I worked as an economist, a very unusual thing in Rio de Janeiro. I went and worked with what would be called Villa Miserias
In the favelas.
Favelas in Rio. And of course, you can't just walk in. You have to find somebody to introduce you.
Yeah.
It was Catholic Church people related to the Catholic Church that would broker your entrance into it. As you say, you find people, who are lovely and, simply have been trapped in misery, but they are wonderful people. Yes.
Yeah.
And also some of them became your actors, huh?
Yeah.
Good.
Because I felt if I was going there and taking their stories, that I had to give something back.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
usually a filmmaker will go there, tell me everything, I'm going to write it all down, and then I'll go away and I'll employ some actors to perform. Whereas I felt they had allowed me in and they told me stories. And so I could tell that they would be very good at acting versions of themselves. Not everyone can do it. I'm not.
Do you think that they changed in any way?
Of course. Well, we all change. I changed also.
Yes, of course. I know that you did. What about them?
as well, of course. Yeah, we moved into, they let me into their world, I let them into mine. So when, I remember the first time when the first film that I did there, a group of the guys came to London, and we were walking around Soho, which is, in central London, and they were going, "You're not looking over your shoulder." And I said, "No, and you don't have to." And so that was an experience also of just thinking, wow, not everybody lives the way we do. And that's on both sides. We have to understand that. So of
Yeah.
course there's big changes, and people start to think differently. But as I say, it's not one way that I'm this person that goes there and teaches other people how to do. It's not like that. We meet and we
Yeah.
change each
Hmm. Funny that you brought Soho into the picture, because my brother Pablo has just finished a film on that is its location is in Soho. It's called Adrift in Soho.
other.
Yeah, perhaps you should come together. Listen, Penny, if we make this longer, probably people won't watch it at all.
Well,
So
they may not want to watch it anyway.
no, I think there is a lot of it that people would want to see. At least I hope so. But I want to thank you very much for it.
You're welcome.
Very enlightening, and I hope you will continue through this and other activities to change people's lives. This is why we got together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Ciao.
Ciao. Don't really know how to finish this, but
I
this is
don't know either. Shall I